I've chosen to analyze the text Satisfaction Guaranteed, written in 1951 by Isaac Asimov. And the text is from the theme of utopia/dystopia. So I would like to begin by giving you a brief summary of the text, and then I will give you an analysis of the most important characteristics of the short story. And in my analysis, I'm going to touch upon the setting and the main characters. In my final interpretation, I'll focus on the theme and the message, and then finally, I will draw parallels to other texts we have written in the class. So, in the short story, upper class housewife named Claire Belmont receives a home robot. A robot which is quite reluctant against in the beginning, but she has to accept the present as it's a present from the company where her husband works for. From the company her husband works for. So Tony, or TN3, as this very humanoid robot is called, will do anything to satisfy Mrs. Belmont, and he succeeds in helping her develop her self-esteem and giving her the tools to become a socialite with a pretty house, which is something that is very important to her. So finally, he pretends to be her lover, and he makes sure that everyone sees him trying to kiss her. So, since the short story is a piece of science fiction, I believe that the setting is quite relevant to comment on. It was written in 1951, but it takes place in the future from when it was written. It takes place 50 years after World War II, which is equivalent to around the year of 1995. So there are two locations where the action takes part, and the main part is set in Mrs. Belmont's home. What is noticeable about her house is that it changes throughout the story. In the beginning, she doesn't believe it's fancy enough to live up to her husband's requirements, and in the ending, because Tony improves it and changes it just a little bit every day, she can't even recognize it, and she she thinks that it's very fancy. So with this change in the setting, the author pursues the goal of symbolizing Claire's personal improvement throughout the story, because her personal improvement is also brought about by Tony. And this brings me on to a characterization of Mrs. Belmont, Claire, the protagonist or the main character. And Claire is as I've just mentioned, a dynamic character. In the beginning, she's unhappy, and the fact that she's unhappy is exemplified on line 41. But I can't be a big man's wife, and he's getting to be a big man. He wants me to be a hostess and an entry into social life for him. But it's no good, she said fiercely. It needs a touch I can't give it. I can only make it comfortable. I can't ever make it the kind to take pictures of for the Home Beautiful magazines. So, based on this quotation, it's my impression that her low self-esteem issues has grown bigger with her husband's success, and broad demands from her. And the improvement that I'm talking about, in a more positive direction where she's become more independent and happy, is symbolized in her clothes, as in the ending she wears clothes that makes her feel proud and confident, and she also says directly that she doesn't care about what Larry, or her husband, thinks about her anymore. So moving on to Tony, I'll analyze him as a character, as he's a very advanced kind of robot. And what the fact that he's a robot dictates that he can't harm a human being, hence the first law of robots, and also he's designed to please his owner. So his motives throughout the entire story is to please Claire and make sure that Claire's happy and satisfied. So when he opened the blinds deliberately, and he must be the one who does it, so that's why I said it's a. I mean it. That's why I say it's a deliberate act. So when he opens the blinds and embraces her and almost tries to kiss her with like almost in public, like at least a lot of people can see it. It it's because he's trying to help her achieve two needs that she's been expressing. The first need is is company because she's very lonely. So playing the part of her lover can sort of fulfill that need. And also she has low self-esteem, does her husband. So when he makes everyone think that he's her lover, she's forced to divorce her husband, and therefore uh, it's Tony's way of getting her out of a very harmful relationship. So what the author was used to go of here is to illustrate how a robot can lack some of the morale that a human being possesses. So as far as I'm concerned, the theme is to find in the contrast between technology and humanity. Tony is an efficient and helpful robot and a very humanoid kind, but he's not human because he doesn't have morale, he doesn't have intuition, and that makes him carry out some actions or an action that is quite harmful and quite above the line for what a human being would do. Um, so the message. So what the author explores here is how authentic can technology become, how realistic and how humanoid can it really be. On line 57 to 60, we see how it's possible to for Claire to sense some very human vibes from Tony, and that can make and all these human features makes it very hard for the reader to and also for Claire to distinguish between a human and a robot. So I'll just read that quotation up. She noticed for an instant that her falling hand must have mussed that sleek hair of his, because for the first time she could see for herself that it was composed of distinct strands, fine black hairs. And then, all at once, she was conscious of his arms about her shoulders and under her knees, holding her tightly and warmly. Um, so yeah, feelings like tight and warm are not usually connected to robots. So again, there is a certain contrast in the short story between technology and humanity. So the message of the short story is relatively unsubtle, but the confusion between human-seeming robots and the role as servitors is a reflection that the author tries to make the reader aware of, and his tone towards the future is not negative or positive, but more like a, a pursuit of raising awareness and making the reader aware of some of the events that could happen in the future with technology, and think about and reflect about how we're going to handle these situations. Um, so why I believe that the text is similar to 1984 by George Orwell is that it's also a piece of science fiction that imagines a future world where technology has come to play a bigger part of people's life. In 1984 is in a more crazy way where the world has become a totalitarianistic state where people's every move is being surveilled, but the two texts are similar in the theme of the broad about moral challenges and the issue that comes with technology. And again, what both texts seem to wonder is how we're going to cope with these changes. And the dystopian protagonist, which is usually which can be a part of science fiction, is not very explicit in satisfaction guaranteed. But what Claire, the protagonist of the story, shares with Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games or Winston Smith from 1984 is the feeling that she's trapped and sort of reluctant against technology, at least in the beginning. But the difference is that she doesn't rebel against it, and she actually becomes quite fond of Tony. So so because that it's not this very dark future, it's a more pleasurable reading experience as the author isn't trying to persuade the reader to fear the future completely, and fear technology completely, and that makes it leave and that means that it leaves a bigger impression because it's more realistic and relatable.